I was a top cadet in the Air Force, but it was in the very moment I thought I was living my brightest life that I died. And in that ending, I was shown something I never expected. The afterlife has never been far from us. I used to think I was strong, the kind of daughter my father could proudly walk beside. Someone good enough, disciplined enough, sharp enough to wear the Air Force uniform and stand tall before 1,000 watching eyes without flinching. But there was one question no one ever asked me, not in school, not at home, not even in the mirror for the first 21 years of my life. Was I truly living for myself? Have you ever lived a life that looked perfect on the outside, but felt as empty as a house that's never had a fire lit in it? Have you ever been so good at everything that people envied you, but couldn't remember the last time you laughed without forcing it? That was my life. I lived like a mask, polished, painted, presented, while inside, there was a silent cry no one could hear. My father had served in the Air Force, too. He never yelled, never raised a hand, but he placed expectations on me the way someone straps a sandbag onto a soldier's back, bit by bit. Every you need to push harder, every don't show weakness, every live in a way others can be proud of, not just yourself. And I obeyed. I nodded. I ran. I climbed. I earned scholarships. I got into the academy. I passed every test. But no one knew that every night when I lay down, I fell into a darkness that had no bottom. I didn't know who I was without achievements. I didn't know what I liked, what I wanted, or even what I felt. Every decision I made was to keep others pleased. I had a boyfriend, but never truly opened my heart. I had friends, but never dared say what I was really afraid of. Once, I tried to cry in front of my father. He looked at me gently and said, "Be strong, sweetheart. We don't have time for weakness." And in that moment, I understood. That fragile girl inside me, she wasn't allowed to exist. And so I kept going, like a machine programmed to achieve. But I no longer felt like I had a soul. Every morning, I ran under the mist with the rest of the cadets. But it wasn't my heartbeat I heard. It was the steady thump of a robot running diagnostics. I looked up at the sky, but felt nothing. No pride, no longing, no emotion. Just a strange kind of distance. Then the dreams began. Strange, unsettling dreams. Night after night, I stood in front of a mirror, but the reflection staring back wasn't me. She looked like me, but her eyes were hollow. Once she whispered, "Do you even know who you are anymore?" I woke up drenched in cold sweat. But I still put on my uniform, fixed my hair, and stepped out like that question had never been asked. Still I knew. I knew something inside me was withering. And I knew I couldn't hold it together forever. That day, the day everything changed, started like any other. A morning drill. A scheduled transport. A simple order to move from one place to another. Nothing unusual. But inside me something stirred. A faint knowing. A quiet premonition. As if part of me already sensed that today would not be like the others. I still got on that truck. Still exchanged polite smiles with my teammates. Still took my seat, just like every other time. But what I didn't know was that just minutes later, every definition I had ever held of life, of death, of self, would be ripped wide open. I thought I had been living well. But the truth was, I had never truly lived at all. And the price of forgetting who you are? You'd never imagine how high it can be. What do you think happens when someone dies? Do you picture a loud explosion? A sharp, unbearable pain? A wave of darkness that comes and then nothing? I used to think that, too, until I was the one in the accident. And the moment I died was so quiet, it felt almost sacred. It all happened so fast. The vehicle suddenly lost control going downhill. There were screams. The screeching of brakes tore through the air like fabric ripping. I don't remember exactly when the first impact happened. I just remember that time seemed to stop. There was a soft pop in my head. Not pain, not blood, just a gentle click like someone flicked a switch halfway. And then, I began to slip out. Not out of the truck, out of my body. Light as smoke. I floated. But I didn't panic. I didn't fight it. It felt like stepping out of a uniform that had been too tight for far too long. And finally I could breathe. I looked down. My body was still there. Motionless. My head tilted to the side. My face is empty of expression. But I didn't feel fear. I didn't feel sorrow. What I felt was release. A weightlessness so pure, I thought I might dissolve into the air. The world around me no longer resembled reality. No sound of engines. No voices. Every noise seemed to be drawn into a silent space, not hollow, but profoundly still. And in that stillness, I became aware of a presence. Not shaped like a person. Not someone I could see. But it knew me. A presence like wind, like light, like the memory of an embrace I had longed for but never received. And it wrapped around me. I heard no voice, but I felt the message settle into every part of me. You've tried hard enough. And for the first time in my life, I believed it. There was no judgment, no interrogation, no listing of right or wrong, just the overwhelming sense that I was loved. Not for being a top cadet, not for perfect scores, not for being strong, but simply because I existed. I began to move not with my feet, but with my thoughts. Every time I thought of something, the space around me shifted. I thought of my mother, and instantly, there she was sitting in the living room, her face full of confusion, her eyes lost in a distant stare. I tried to call out to her, but no sound came. Instead, a wave of emotion poured out of me, like an invisible embrace reaching for her from afar. And strangely, I saw her turn her head, as if she had just felt something. I thought of my father and saw him standing silently in front of a wall, his fists clenched. The man who had always seemed so strong now stood frozen in a silence that felt paralyzing. But I could feel that he was blaming himself, even if he'd never say the words. And in his eyes, I saw the truth he never knew how to express. He loved me. He just didn't know how to show it. I thought of myself, and suddenly, I saw a little girl, 10 years old, curled up on her bed, scribbling in her diary the words, "I'm sorry I'm not perfect." I wanted to run to her. I wanted to hold her and whisper, "You don't have to be perfect. Just by being alive, you're already enough." The space around me kept changing. I was no longer in this world. I was brought to a place beyond time. Everything there was filled with light, not a blinding, harsh light, but a kind of light that breathed, that wrapped around your soul like a warm blanket. I had no body, but I had awareness. I had no eyes, but I could see. No ears, but I could hear. And I knew I was no longer human. I was a soul. And in that moment, I realized something heartbreaking and beautiful all at once. I had lived so many years without ever knowing what my soul even looked like. I had cared for my body, my reputation, and my accomplishments. But I had never once stopped to ask, is my soul even breathing? Now, free from the weight of my body, I could finally see myself. Not distorted, not wounded, not needing to prove anything. Just me. And I was beautiful not in any way a mirror could reflect, but in a way only the spirit could recognize. I had died, but for the very first time, I was alive as who I truly am, and that's what brought me to tears. I used to think that if there was an afterlife, it would be something like a courtroom, where God sat high on a throne, asking me questions about my failures, my actions, everything I'd done wrong in life. But that's not what happened. There was no God passing judgment. No sentence. No interrogator. There was only one thing. Me standing before the entirety of my life like a film being played in reverse. No fast forward, no skipping ahead. I didn't see it with my eyes. I became each moment. I wasn't watching myself from the outside. I was that 14-year-old girl again, standing in a classroom, trying to laugh as my classmates called me the walking robot. I heard myself laugh, but inside, there was a sob no one else heard. And for the first time, I felt that loneliness, as fresh and sharp as if it had just happened. I saw myself at 16, standing in the kitchen as my father told me I couldn't study art. "The Air Force is your future," he said. "Drawing is weak." I nodded then. But now, in the realm of the soul, I heard the whisper of my truth. I don't want this. I want something else. I thought I'd just see my actions. But no, I felt the emotions of the people I had touched. I saw the girl I abandoned when she was being bullied. I didn't speak up. I stayed quiet, afraid of being targeted too. And I felt the wound she carried in silence for years after. A quiet kind of pain that didn't scream, but it redirected the course of her life. I saw my ex-boyfriend, the one I ended things with so coldly, because I told myself he wasn't on my level. At the time, I thought I was being decisive. But now I knew the truth. I was terrified he might see the soft, frightened parts of me. I felt his hurt, not from losing me, but from wondering, did I ever actually get to be loved for who I was? Each moment appeared not to punish me, but to show me that every decision, every glance, every word sent out ripples. Nothing was ever just a small thing. I had moved through the lives of others like someone running toward a finish line, unaware that every collision left a mark. There was one scene that broke me wide open. I was 7 years old, sitting alone under a tree, drawing my very first picture, a scribbled image of a girl who could fly. I remember thinking, in some vague and tender way, maybe I was born to do something light, something free. But then my father walked by, glanced at the drawing, and said, That's nice, but you should focus more on math. And that picture, I never drew it again. The final scene in my life review was a dinner. I was sitting with my parents, eating in silence. My mother quietly placed more food on my plate. My father stared at his phone. It was an entirely ordinary moment. But in that stillness, I saw something clearly for the first time: the distance between people who were supposed to be closest. And I understood. We had never truly met each other, even though we had spent a lifetime side by side. I cried, but it wasn't a painful cry. It was a kind of unraveling. I cried because I realized how long I had been alive without actually living. I had spent so much time chasing approval that I'd lost the voice inside myself. And then I heard something, not with my ears, but with my entire being. A voice with no sound, but deeper than any words ever spoken. No one is judging you. You've done that to yourself. And now it's time to choose to keep living the way you were, or come back home to who you are. In that moment, I knew I was standing at a crossroads of the soul. I wasn't forced to choose. No one told me to return, or to stay. But I felt that if I chose to go back, I would have to live differently. Not to prove anything, but to be fully present. To touch life not through achievements, but through love. I asked, if I go back, will I have the courage to live honestly? And I saw an image not of the person I had been, but someone I'd never seen before. It was me, standing in a wide open field, the wind tangling my hair. No uniform, no rank, just light in my eyes. And I was smiling. A real smile. I thought I needed saving. But the truth was I just needed to see myself again and forgive. And that's when the real journey began. After the life review ended, I thought the journey was over. I assumed I would now be given a choice: continue into the light, or return to the world I had left behind. But I was wrong. My journey had only just entered a deeper layer, a layer of memory, of unspoken regrets, of silent longings I had never named. And it was there, in that sacred quiet, that I encountered two souls my heart had been searching for, unknowingly, for years. The first to step out from the light was my grandfather. He had passed when I was far too young to fully understand what grief meant. He wore an old button-down shirt, light khaki pants, and his silver hair shimmered like moonlight. No wings, no halo, but the look in his eyes alone brought me to tears. He didn't speak right away. He just looked at me, then opened his arms. And I walked into them like we'd never been apart. His embrace wasn't of the body, it was of memory. From every night I cried quietly after my father's harsh words. I had always imagined my grandfather holding me. And now, here he was, more real than any dream, speaking with a warm, steady voice I had almost forgotten. You don't have to be strong like I once taught you. I was wrong to believe that toughness was the key to survival. Vulnerability is the most beautiful form of courage. I broke down. The words I had never heard from my father, my grandfather, were now speaking on his behalf. The gentle touch I had always longed for from a man in my family, he gave it to me now, from the other side. I cried not from sorrow, but because finally, someone permitted me to be soft. He didn't say much else. He simply placed his hand on my forehead, like a blessing, and slowly faded back into the light. But I knew he wasn't gone. He had returned to the place where those who love us remain quiet, tender, never truly leaving. And then, another soul appeared. I recognized him instantly, even though nearly a decade had passed since I had last spoken his name. James, my classmate from high school. He had been the only one to ever ask me, "Are you okay?" during those years when academic pressure was crushing me. I smiled at him then, nodded, and kept running. A year later, he took his own life. I had never forgiven myself for not asking James that same question in return. I had never understood why he left the world so young. And now, there he was standing right in front of me. No anger, no sadness. His eyes were filled with a compassion so deep, it was as if death had made him transparent. You couldn't save me, he said, because you were still dying in your way. But now you can save others, if you choose to go back. I trembled. But what if I'm not strong enough? What if it's too late? He smiled gently. It's not about strength. And it's not about time. The chance you're looking for it doesn't exist in the future. It lives in the choice you make in this very moment. I looked at James, and in that moment, I no longer saw the high school boy who ended his own life. I saw a soul whole, luminous, returned not to be mourned, but to guide. And I understood, those who leave early are not always gone. Sometimes, they become the gatekeepers for the ones still wandering through their own lives. The space around me began to shift again. The souls that had gathered quietly faded, like mist dissolving into morning light. but I could feel each of them. They weren't gone. They had become part of the light around me, a part of the whisper that would lead me toward my choice. I hadn't made it yet, but for the first time, I understood that I wasn't alone. I was no longer the girl slowly dying from living the wrong life. I was a soul loved, held, and gently called not to return as I was, but to return with a new heart. I had met those I once lost, only to discover I had never really lost them. They were here not to make me forget the pain, but to show me how to shape that pain into something beautiful. I used to think that choosing whether to return or not would be a quiet, deliberate decision, something I'd weigh carefully, like picking a college major or signing a contract. But I was wrong. The soul doesn't choose with logic. The soul is moved by what it witnesses. And what I was shown next made the decision impossible to ignore. No one guided me. No voice warned me. I was simply swept into another space. Not a physical place, but a layer of reality that ran parallel to this world. There was no soft white light like before. Instead, everything carried a muted gray tone. It felt like a dream, except it was the dream of a world where I no longer existed. I saw my father. He stood before a framed photo of me. His face was dry, expression unreadable, but both fists were clenched tightly at his sides. The man who had once taught me discipline now stood adrift in the very silence he had always relied on. In my death, he didn't just lose a daughter, he lost the belief that strength alone could save someone. He began to fold inward, retreating into a silence that hollowed him out. My mother, frail and drawn, stared out the window every morning as if hoping desperately that something might still return. Then I was taken to a small room. Inside sat a younger cadet, a woman I had once been assigned to mentor in tactical training. I never learned her name in the living world. But now I saw her with red-rimmed eyes, sitting alone, holding a rejection letter for a scholarship. She stared at a photo of me, then whispered, "If she couldn't make it, how am I supposed to survive?" I stood there, stunned. I had no idea I was someone's anchor. I had no idea that just my presence, my example, had once given others the strength to keep going. And now, with me gone, they were beginning to crumble like young trees without a windbreak. Like voices trying to rise in a storm, with no one left to echo back. And in that moment, I understood, my absence wasn't just a quiet end. It was a ripple, a shadow, a silence that could echo for generations. I was taken to a hospital, into a room where a young woman had just come through a psychological crisis. A doctor asked her who she wanted to speak with. In another timeline, she would have chosen me, the mentor she would have met through a program for female officers I had once hesitated to join. But if I didn't go back, she would never know me, and that therapy session would fail. Then I was shown a classroom. A group of children was listening to a speaker talk about the meaning of living truthfully. In another timeline, I was the one standing there, not in uniform, but with a healed voice, sharing my story, my journey back to life. But if I didn't return, someone else would speak, and something vital would be missing, lived experience. There were no screams, no dramatic tragedies, only small cracks, subtle and quiet, that no one would notice until they became a hollow space. And I realized something I had never considered during all my years of striving. My existence was never meaningless. Even the quietest presence can be a thread that holds something together in this world. There was one scene that brought me to my knees. A child, a little girl, maybe 6 years old, standing alone on a playground. I didn't know who she was, but when her eyes met mine, I felt something, some strange, undeniable bond. As if I were meant to protect her. As if I were the one who would pass something on to her, something only I could give, if I stayed alive. But if I left, if I chose not to return, she would face something dark. She would grow up under a shadow I could have lit. And I broke down, because I understood, the lives we touch are never random. And sometimes, our souls make promises to the universe, promises to show up for those other souls. The space began to fold in again. I returned to that floating state. But this time, my heart was no longer light. It was full of a kind of knowing I had never carried before. I'm not finished here. Not because I haven't achieved enough, but because there are still threads of love I have yet to fully live. I thought of my parents, of the people I'd hurt, of those I hadn't yet helped heal. And I understood, going back isn't returning to pain. It's returning to make it right. Not to keep living the wrong way, but to begin living differently. Once more, I felt that presence, but not as something outside of me. It was the voice of my soul, gentle but unmistakable. If you choose to return, you will not be the same. You are a seed reborn from your death. I used to fear dying. But now, I fear something greater, leaving this world without ever having lived truthfully. And if there's still a chance, I will go back. Not to prove anything, but to love in the way I was always meant to. There was no blinding light, no heavenly music, no dramatic beeping of a machine announcing resurrection. There was only a breath, soft, fragile, but carrying the weight of an entire universe behind it. That breath was mine. When I opened my eyes, it wasn't with the same eyes that had once been trained to see life through the lens of perfection. It was with eyes that had walked through death and come back with a purpose greater than myself. The hospital ceiling wasn't beautiful. The fluorescent lights buzzed dimly. There was a small crack in the corner of the wall. But in that moment, everything felt sacred, because I knew I had returned. Not in the same old body, but in a new form, with a soul that had finally awakened. My body hurts. Physically, yes. But compared to the pain my soul had carried for years, this was nothing more than a whisper, a reminder, you are alive. This feeling is real. I closed my eyes again, not to sleep, but to feel. To feel each breath, each heartbeat, each surge of blood rushing through me like a song I had never stopped to hear before. The first day back wasn't a miracle glow. It was oxygen tubes. For drips. My mother's hollowed face. My father's dark-circled eyes. But something was different. I didn't look at them with blame anymore. I wasn't trying to earn their approval. I just saw two human beings still learning how to love, how to live, and how to heal in their own ways. I smiled, even through the pain, because for the first time, I didn't see ideal parents. I saw fellow souls on a journey just like mine. It took me weeks to speak a full sentence again. But when I did, it wasn't "I'm okay," or "When can I go home?" My first words were, "I remember the light." My parents didn't understand. But I did. Because that light wasn't out there anymore. It was in me now. I began to write. Not military reports, but fragments of memory. Old questions. Truths I had hidden for too long. I began to draw again, starting with the girl who had wings, the one I had abandoned in childhood. Not to be good at it. Not to get it right. Just to be real. I want to see a therapist. For the first time, I spoke honestly. About the fear of being left behind. About the emptiness of living like a puppet. About the moments I wanted to disappear. I didn't speak to gain pity. I spoke so I could stop pretending. And in that therapy room, I wasn't the top cadet anymore. I was just someone learning, finally, how to live. I began to say no to the things that made me feel suffocated, even if it meant disappointing others. I withdrew from the elite training program. My father was furious, but I didn't explain. I simply looked at him and said, "I want to live truthfully, even if that truth doesn't look like the version of me you once imagined." He didn't respond. But in his eyes, I saw a crack. And through that crack, light began to slip in. I started telling my story. At first, just through a blog. Then, through small gatherings, a group of college students, a circle of people recovering from depression. And slowly, doors began to open. Not the doors of fame, but doors shaped like whispers. Your story felt like mine. It scared me how much it sounded like me. I was planning to end my life, but now, I want to try again. I didn't think anyone else felt this empty. Not until I heard you speak. I didn't become famous, but I became real. And that, more than anything, saved my life. Once, while walking through the forest I often visited when I needed peace, I paused beneath a canopy of trees. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, spilling softly across my hands. A breeze passed. I closed my eyes. And in that still moment, I heard a familiar voice, not with my ears, but with my whole being. You didn't return to continue life. You returned to begin again. I opened my eyes. There was no sign of my grandfather, no glimpse of James, but I knew they were there in the wind, in the water, in every invisible touch that reminded me I was never alone. I didn't come back to be a hero. I came back simply to be human. And sometimes that's the greatest miracle of all. Changing yourself is hard, but witnessing the person who once hurt you slowly begin to change. That is a quiet kind of miracle. Not the kind that blazes across the sky, but the kind that unfolds gently, like a flower pushing through dry, cracked soil. My father didn't transform overnight. He was still silent at dinner, still clocked in and out of work at the same hours, still reminded me to stay disciplined and get enough sleep. But he stopped interrupting me when I spoke about emotions. He didn't always understand, but he listened. And for me, that was the beginning of a quiet revolution. One evening, as I was journaling by the window, My father approached me with a small wooden box in his hands. "It belonged to your grandfather," he said. "Before he passed, he asked me to keep it. I've never opened it. But maybe. It's time you had it." I opened the box. Inside was an old letter, yellowed with age. My grandfather's handwriting was written to my father when he was young, facing the same pressure he would later place on me. In the letter, he apologized. He said he didn't know how to love his son with gentleness. He only knew how to love through discipline, because that was how he was raised. But he hoped his son would one day find a new way to love, a way that didn't require armor. As I read those words aloud, my father said nothing. He just sat there, staring into the distance. His hand on the table trembled slightly. "Maybe. I need to start over, too," he whispered, his voice rough. "Will you teach me?" I didn't respond with words. I simply placed my hand over his. For the first time in our lives, not out of duty, not because of rules, just a touch between two souls, both carrying wounds, both learning how to heal. My mother changed too, but in her quiet way. She started laughing more. Even when there wasn't a clear reason.